everybody, today we're going to work on the Boo-tiful Neighborhood 2 houses from the September 2025 Hoop Studio kit. We'll make both of these houses today. I've already gone through the instructions, looked at the fabric, cut my fabric, attached my fusible, and pulled my threads. I'll go over everything with you. There's a couple things in our kit we're going to set aside for now. First is the little tombstone display piece. This is just to set up next to your houses. Don't lose that. And the LED lights, which we will put inside the houses at the end. I've pulled my threads for house number 3, which is the tall, skinny house, the first one we're going to work on today. I have everything in my Kimberbell embroidered snap tray. I've got a video on my channel on how to embroider this tray. I'll link that below. The colors given are for glide thread. I'm not using glide thread. I'm using a combination of Floriani and Sim Thread brands. I think I've pulled good matches for everything. I have my black, my white. This color is for the one called Flint. This is for the burnt orange. This is Shadow and Starlight. And I just realized I did not pull a Sun-Kissed Peach. This looks pretty good. We'll use this for the Sun-Kissed Peach. I have all the fabric cut. I do have fusible on the back of all of the fabrics. No fusible on the back of the chiffon. This is for the windows. For this project, we need a medium cutaway stabilizer. I don't have the Kimberbell medium cutaway. I have some Floriani medium cutaway. This came with one of my embroidery machines, so I'll be using this today. But if you've got your Kimberbell medium cutaway, go ahead and get that in your hoop. I'm going to work through all of these pieces in 5x7 hoops today. I'm going to load some medium cutaway into my hoop, hand tighten, screwdriver tighten, and let's head over to the machine. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian today. Let's bring up our file. My file's on USB. We're going to start with house number 3. We'll start with the front of the house. It's one file. Go ahead and bring that up, set, and we're ready to go. It has us starting with the Sun-Kissed Peach thread. Whatever color thread you are using for that, go ahead and get that on your machine. We're going to stitch out the house base placement line and sewing guides. You want to take a piece of that shape form, make sure to cover that line completely, and you want to tape this in place. I added a piece of tape across the top and down the side. If you like, you can also tape the side and the bottom. I think this is going to be just fine, and I'm near the end of my roll of tape. We're going to stitch the house front base tack down line and scoring guides. I'm over at my table. We're going to do a bit of trimming. The first thing we want to do is trim everything outside of the lines. Ignore this part for right now. You just want to get rid of everything that's outside of your lines. If you have a little bit of tape caught in this, don't worry about picking this out. You can pick it out if you like, but this is all going to get covered with fabric. Here's how I like to work with this. I'm going to turn this toward me. I find it easier to kind of press it up like that and then do my trimming. So press it and then I'll trim this piece. It just helps it stick up, so wherever you're going to trim, if you kind of fold it first, then it sort of lifts away and it makes it easier to trim. I'm going to use some curved scissors to do this. Try not to trim your stabilizer. If you do accidentally poke a hole in your stabilizer, flip it to the back, put down a piece or two of the paper tape, and you'll be just fine. No worries. We're going to go through this first piece really slow, step by step. Then going forward, it'll go faster because everything is going to be built the same way. Let's go ahead and trim everything on the outside. So be careful of your stabilizer. That's why I like to fold it up. Makes it kind of easier to see everything. We're on step 7, page 6. You need a seam ripper for this, and you want to make sure you've got your hoop on a nice flat surface. It says to take a seam ripper and carefully unpick tack down stitches shown in blue at the end of the scoring guide shown in red. So if you look at your instructions, this line here and this line here are what they're calling the scoring guides. They show those in red. The tack down stitches they're talking about are right up here and right down here. So it's just a couple of tiny stitches, but it tells us to go ahead and unpick those tack down stitches. Got my seam ripper. I'm going to go for the ones right here at the top first, and it just wants us to unpick these. I'll probably have to pick this up and get a little closer, but we're going to pull those stitches right there. I'm going to hold this up to get a close-up. You can see I pulled just a couple of stitches right there, and then at the bottom a couple of stitches right there. You're going to take your seam ripper. It tells you to put it ball point down. So here's ball point down. What they want us to do is to cut right here on the shape form, and only cut the shape form and not cut the stabilizer, which is why they're telling us to put this ball point down. We've opened up the ends here and here, so your seam ripper should fit. This is kind of a fat one. I may have to get I'm probably going to have to get a smaller seam ripper to get it to fit in there. Let me go grab a different seam ripper. I'm going to try this Clover seam ripper, see the size difference. It still has the ball point, so let's go ahead and we'll put it ball point down. The only problem is this thing is thick. I'm going to go the other way. Ball point down, and then before I go slicing it, I'm flipping it to make sure I'm not through my stabilizer, and I'm not. I can't see my seam ripper on the back. You know, it's a retractable. There, I have to make sure it's locked in place. So and it keeps wanting to go back in. Alright, don't recommend this seam ripper for this particular project. Let's go ahead and see. Okay, I've got it started. Now I'm going back to the big seam ripper. You can check again on the back. I can see the ball point, but I'm not poking through the stabilizer. Just go slowly, and you just want to shave that little bit of shape form. You can almost kind of lift your seam ripper as you go, not too much though. You don't want to mess up what you've got in your hoop and mess up the alignment. Just had a big noisy truck go by, so if there's a weird cut in the video, sorry about that. Oh, I'm at the end, and apparently I didn't quite get all the little stitches. So you have to make sure you've got all these stitches pulled. Yep, I did. I missed one right there. Okay, now the stitches are cut. I'm going to go ball point down. Holy smokes, guys, watch your fingers. Looks good. I managed to do it without wrecking the stabilizer. Happy day. Back at the machine, we're going to stitch the house front placement line. We still have that peach color on our machine. Grab your house front fabric, make sure everything is covered, and we're going to stitch the house front tack down line. Our tack down line has stitched out. Don't trim anything right now. We're going to stitch the gable front placement line. So it's going to stitch another line right here. Grab the gable fabric. You want to make sure to completely cover that triangle, and then we're going to stitch the tack down. The trimming on this is going to be a little bit different. We're on step 14, page 7. It tells us to cut the bottom part first, and then to cut upward from both bottom pieces at a 90-degree angle. So we're not cutting the triangle. We're going to cut across the bottom and then cut straight up and straight up. I'll go ahead and do that and show you what it looks like. I already cut the bottom. I used a pair of snips to do that. Now I'm going to take the sides and fold it and finger press it. That'll give me a good mark where I need to cut the lines going straight up. Rather than trying just to purely eyeball it, I'm making myself a couple of marks. Got some regular scissors here. These are Karen K. Buckley scissors. They're very, very, very sharp. I'm going to cut along that straight fold line. There, and then over here. I think this is easier to cut with a pair of regular scissors rather than curved scissors, since we're trying to cut a straight line. Once you've got that trimmed, it's time to change our thread color. The color they have in the instructions is called Flint. This is the color I'm using. This is the Sim Thread brand. I'm going to put that on my machine, and then we're going to stitch out the gable slats details. Next, we're going to switch to black thread, and we're going to stitch out the cobwebs. I forgot to record stitching the cobwebs. Sorry about that. My battery's low and I had to plug it in, and I forgot to press the button. Once your cobwebs are stitched, we're switching back to that peach color, and we're going to stitch the gable satin outline. I'm laughing at myself because I touched the camera and I thought I hit record, but I didn't. So our satin outline has stitched. We're going to switch to the color shadow. This is the color I've picked out. Going to put this on the machine. We're going to stitch the windows trimming lines. We're on step 19. It says to apply a fray preventative product inside of the trimming lines, then use the seam ripper, cut the fabric, shape form, and stabilizer close to the trimming lines. Don't cut the stitches. I'm going to skip the fray check. If I use fray check right now, I have to add the fray check and let it sit and wait for it to dry. I need to keep filming, so you'll get to see what this looks like without using a fray preventative product. We want to get rid of the center of the windows. You're cutting through the fabric, the shape form, and the stabilizer, so you're cutting through everything. I'm going to start with a seam ripper. I'm going to put a hole in the corner and kind of press down. So I'm pushing straight down like that. I want to make sure it goes through to the back. It has, I can see it. It's hard to see on camera, but I can see it, I can feel it. I'm going to go ahead and use my seam ripper and be really, really, really careful. I'm going to go ahead and go this way. Just go slowly. Okay, now I'm close to the top. You can get some scissors, the sharper the better, and I can see I didn't get as close to that stitch line as I would like. I may need to go back and trim a little bit better. Let's make sure I went through the whole thing. I don't think I did. No, I didn't. Okay. I only went through the top layer. There. Now I'm through everything. Let's go ahead and get to the bottom. I'm going to stop before I hit that top seam line, and then I'm going to use my scissors. I'm going to get in that and then cut that last little bit with my pair of scissors. Now I can go through and cut with scissors, or I can continue to use the seam ripper, whatever's easiest for you. This fabric does fray. A lot, actually. That's why they're telling you to use the fray preventative, so you don't end up with fuzzies under your chiffon when we put down our windows. Let's take a look at this. Not the best job. I'm not too worried though. There's going to be satin stitch detail all around this. I am going to go back with my scissors and see if I can't get a little bit closer. And I'll go ahead and cut the other two windows, and I'll show you how those turn out. Here's how they turned out. One thing I'll mention is this is a spooky house. I am so not worried about getting these absolutely straight. If they're a little crooked, I actually think it's going to add to the charm of this. We're going to want to turn our hoop to the back, and we're going to be working with our piece of chiffon. I haven't folded, starched, and pressed mine yet. I can see it's going to fit this way. Just like that. I'm going to go take this to the ironing board. I'm going to spray starch it. I like this kind of starch. You can use whatever kind of starch you have on hand. This is readily available, discount stores, online, easy to get, not very expensive. I'm going to starch this, fold it in half, and press it. Here's what that looks like, folded in half, starched and pressed. You want to cover the windows. You want to make sure you tape this and tape it good. You don't want this sliding around when we go to do our next embroidery steps. I've got everything taped. I'm going to have a look at it from the front really quick. Make sure there's no big threads sticking out because I didn't use that fray preventative. we're going to be stitching the window satin outlines and grids in the color Shadow. Let's get a close-up of the stitching. Remember, I didn't use the fray preventative. There will be a difference. If you don't want to have some of the fuzzies poking through, make sure you allow the time to use that fray check product. I do use Drit's fray check. It works very well, but when I use that, I have to let it dry. I wanted to get this filmed. I'm not worried about this because these are spooky haunted houses. I think it looks just fine. Let's go on to the next step. You're going to want to turn to the back of the hoop, remove your tape, and it says to apply a fray preventative product a 1/4 inch away from the windows, and then we're going to trim away the excess chiffon. I'm not going to use the fray preventative product. This is going to be inside the house when it's done. I'm probably going to cut it a little further away than a 1/4 of an inch. That way I don't have to worry about it fraying. I've got my tape off, and remember, this is the inside of the house. I've made the collectible Christmas houses. I have a few more to go. Let me know if you want to see any of those on video. So I'm not worried about cutting this a 1/4 inch away. We just need to get the extra out of the way. There's a trim line right there, so I'm going to get a little closer to that. Don't worry about that exactly 1/4 inch away. Just cut some of the extra away. You're not going to see this. This is going to be the inside of the house. It can be sloppy, it doesn't matter, unless you want to get as close as possible and save the little bits of chiffon for something else. This is all trimmed, not necessarily neat and clean, and I didn't use the fray preventative. It's going to be just fine. It's going to be inside of my house. We're going to get this back on our machine, and you want to load your black thread. We're going to stitch out the fence detail along the bottom of the front of the house. Switch to whatever color you're using for the burnt orange, and we're going to stitch out the door placement line. Grab your door fabric, right side up, make sure to completely cover that placement line, and then we'll stitch the door tack down line. Trim away the fabric that's outside of the tack down line, and then we're going to stitch the satin outline and the door detail. Switch to your peach color. We're going to stitch the fold line and the dormer fill. Once you've stitched the fold line and the dormer fill, we're going to switch to white. It's going to stitch a little window inside that dormer. Once the window has stitched, switch to the color Shadow. We're going to stitch the dormer window outline. It's going to go across the top, around the little window, and then we're going to stitch the doorknob all in this color. Everything's stitched out really nice. The only part of mine that's messy is around the windows, and remember, I didn't use the fray check. So if you want your windows to look nice and neat, make sure you use that fray check product. We're going to go over to the table, get this out of the hoop, and get it trimmed, and then go on to the next piece of this house. I've got my project out of the hoop. We're on number 34, page 8 of your instructions. We're going to measure and trim all the layers along the top and the bottom, shown in red, a 1/4 inch away from the tack down line. Let me show you that. You can see the red right here, and then down here. So we need to go a 1/4 inch away. Grab a ruler, grab your rotary cutter. Let's start with the bottom. That's the easiest place to start. We're looking at this line right here. I have a Creative Grids ruler. This is the 6.5 by 12.5. It has a nice 1/4 inch mark all the way down the ruler. I'm going to line that up along that stitch line, and that's where I'm going to trim. We've trimmed the bottom. We're going to work on the top. We're going to trim here, here, and here. I'm going to grab a smaller ruler. It'll be easier to work with. This is a 4.5 inch square ruler. We're going to trim here and here. So we're going to stop a 1/4 inch before this as we're trimming this piece. So when I lay down my 1/4 inch, I don't want to go all the way. That's going to be too far. I can follow my 1/4 inch line here, and there's another one right across the top. So I know to stop right at that point. I'm going to go ahead and cut cut slow, and I want to stop about there. I can always get in with the scissors and cut more if I need to. Then I'm going to turn it this way, and I probably will. I'm looking at it right now. Actually, I'm going to turn it this way, like that, and we're going to cut 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to go back and look. See, I need to go ahead and get those 2 points to meet. I'm going to use my scissors for that. Like that. There we go. So you've got your 1/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, and then we need to do this line here, and watch out because it's got a little bump out here. You're going to have the same thing. So you want to be sure to stop 1/4 inch away. So I'm going to trim, and I'm going to stop 1/4 inch away. And we're going to look at it from this angle. And then I'll go back with my scissors. You can draw lines if you want. I just find it's easier to do it this way. There. And there. So you've cut 1/4 inch away from the bottom and 1/4 inch away from the top. Next we're going to trim the sides. It shows us to cut very close to the left and right tack down lines shown in blue. Right here, right here. I don't want to cut too close, so what I'll do is I'll line up the 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll scooch it in. It's got little dash lines here that are 1/8 of an inch. I'll go with 1/8 inch. You can always cut off more if needed. When we go to do any of the assembly, if I haven't cut close enough, I can always cut off more. So I'm lining up my 1/4 inch. I'm going to slide it. Follow those dash lines for my 1/8 of an inch and cut that. Here's where we are so far. Next we're going to cut some notches. We're going to cut the peak off here. In the corner we're going to cut a V, cut the corner off, cut the corner off, cut the corner off, and cut a slit. Let's go ahead and do those together. I'm going to start at the top. You can do scissors, you can do rotary cutter. I'm going to put this, that's 1/4 of an inch. It only cuts off the little tip. I'm going to go with that little 1/8 of an inch line and just cut the tip off right there. I don't want to cut into my stitches. Cut that and cut that. Let's do the corners first. That's going to be pretty easy. I'll use that 1/8 of an inch dash. And again, when I go to assemble, if it's still too much bulk, I can always cut extra. But if you cut too much or cut into your stitches, you may have some difficulty. So I've cut the top peak, the bottom 2 peaks. We need to cut the corner here. Now I need scissors. For this part right here, it shows cutting one line. I'm going to cut from the corner here, kind of going out. We're going to be folding things over and putting the house together. There's where I'm going to cut that. Don't cut into your stitches. If you do, it's not the end of the world. Don't worry about it. We're going to be using glue. You can fix anything. No worries. And then here we're going to cut a little notch out. So I'm going to aim for that corner right there, but not cut the stitches. Like that. Like that. And I've got my little notch. We're going to use some glue. This just got delivered. I just pulled it out of the box. I'm glad it showed up in time. I'm going to turn this around to the back. We're going to be gluing top and bottom pieces. I think I'll go get another mat because it's really hard to see on this white. I've got my glue and I've got some clips. I'm going to start with the bottom. We're going to put some glue on this, and then you're going to want to fold it, and you can either hold it in place or you can clip it. I've done quite a few of those collectible Christmas houses. I always clip it. The one thing I will say is when you're clipping, I try to clip as close to the bottom as I can, because if I clip it, particularly with the regular glue, and I had to let it sit overnight, when I would take the clip off, I would have an indent. This is supposed to set a lot faster. I'm going to go ahead and put some glue down. It's supposed to have a tip on it that you can cut to adjust the glue, and it doesn't. It's all metal. Hopefully it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and hold that for a moment. Do you see that? That dried really quick, but do you see how it just glued the stabilizer? I'm going to go ahead and put down another little bead of glue. It smells like glue. And glue the fabric. And I'm going to add some clips, and I'm going to let that dry. It is holding it a lot quicker than the regular. The regular glue is almost like an Elmer's glue, and you really do have to either sit and hold it or clip it and let it sit overnight. There's the bottom. Now we need to do this piece here. And I'm guessing it's going to be the same thing. Yeah, stabilizer and fabric. And then we need to do both sides here, here, and the little tiny piece here. What I'm noticing is I've got stabilizer, roof fabric, and gable fabric. So I need to make sure everything gets glued down. Everything I need to glue is set. We don't glue anything on the sides. I'm going to leave the clips in and we'll work on the house back. Let's work on the back of our house. Bring up that file. This is going to be just like the front. There's a little bit less detail on the back side. We're going to start with the base placement line and sewing guide, peach colored thread. Cover that line with your shape form, and then we're going to stitch the tack down line. You want to take off your tape, cut everything outside of the tack down line. Once you've got that trimmed, we need to do the same thing to this one that we just did on the last one. Pop those stitches up here at the top and at the bottom, and then take your seam ripper and run it through the shape form only, not through your stabilizer, so make sure you put that ball point part of your seam ripper down. If you do happen to accidentally cut your stabilizer, just turn it to the back and put some paper tape on it. This is going to be the inside of your little house. Nobody's going to see it. It's not going to matter, so don't panic if you cut your stabilizer. I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera since I already showed you how to do that. Got that little seam ripped right there up the middle. Going to put this back on the machine, and we're going to stitch our house back fabric placement line. Grab your house back fabric, make sure to cover those placement lines, and go ahead and stitch the tack down. You want to switch to white thread, and we're going to stitch the placement line for the gable fabric. Grab your gable fabric, cover that placement line, and then stitch the tack down. We're going to trim this just like before, where you trim the bottom and then you trim straight up. So go ahead and make those trims, and then we're going to switch our thread to the color Flint, whatever you're using for that, and we're going to stitch the gable slats detail. Switch to black, and we're going to stitch the cobwebs. Switch to your peach thread, and we're going to stitch the gable satin outline. You want to switch to whatever color you're using for shadow, and we're going to stitch the windows trimming lines. Once these are stitched, if you want that nice clean finish, you need to put that fray preventative on there. And then we're going to trim these out just like before, exact same procedure. Once they're trimmed out, we'll flip to the back and tape our chiffon just like before. So I already showed that. I'll go ahead and do that off camera. My windows are trimmed. They look a little neater this time. My chiffon is folded in half, starched, pressed, and taped all the way around. I'm going to put this back on my machine. We're still using the color shadow. We're going to stitch the window satin outlines and detail. let's have a look at the windows. Definitely have got some fuzzies. So if you don't want those fuzzies, use that fray preventative. We're going to flip to the back, take off your tape, and trim the chiffon. It says 1/4 inch away. I'm going to do the same thing as last time. I'm just going to trim it, make sure it's out of the way. I'm not worried about adding fray check to this because it's on the inside, but you can certainly do that. It is in the instructions. I've got this all trimmed. I'm going to put it back on the machine. I'm going to switch to black thread. We're going to stitch the fence detail. Switch to the peach color, and we're going to stitch the fold line. That's the last thing we need to stitch. Everything has stitched out. This piece is the exact same shape as the other one. You're going to do the same trimming just like before. I'll go ahead and do the trimming and the gluing off camera since we just did that, and then we're going to work on the roof. We're going to work on the roof. Isn't that a pretty screensaver? Let's go ahead and load the files, and there's a few things you need to prepare before we do the roof for this project. We're doing the tall house first, house 3. Load your house 3 roof. It's just one file. We're going to be stitching the roof in the color Starlight. This is the color I've picked for that. You want to load your medium cutaway in your 5x7 hoop. With the roof fabric, you need to fold it wrong side together and press it. The first thing we're going to stitch is the roof base placement line. Once that's stitched, you want to take your shape form and some tape. Make sure to cover that placement line. Tape it down in place, and then we're going to stitch the tack down. Take off your tape, trim everything that's outside of that stitch line. I have all the outside extra trimmed off. What we need to do is just like we did before, pop the stitches here and here, and then put your seam ripper ballpoint down, and you want to only seam rip through the shape form. But again, if you seam rip through the whole thing, put, I'd say, 2 pieces of paper tape on the back. Make sure it's pressed nice and flat. I've got that slit right there. I'm going to put this back on, and we're going to stitch the placement line for the roof fabric. Grab your roof fabric. This is the one that is not folded in half. You want to cover that completely, and we're going to stitch 2 things. The first thing we're going to stitch is the tack down. It's going to go all the way around, and then we'll stitch the fold through the center. Next, we're going to stitch the roof detail. Now's a good time to check your bobbin. You want to grab your 2 pieces of eaves fabric. These are the ones that we folded in half. You want the fold in the center. We need to cover this up, and they need to overlap by about 1/2 inch. You want to tape this because it's going to stitch all the way around and tack it down. Let's figure out which way it's going to go. I'm going to advance this a little bit. Okay, so see, it's going down first and then this way. When I do my overlap, I actually want to do it, I think, this way. That way, when it goes around, it'll go this way, it'll run over this and kind of get everything set. Now, it's going to go all the way around and cross this way, so you definitely need to make sure you've got it taped. But at least for that first part, I know it'll run that way over the seam. I'm going to get my tape, and they show you taping across the fold, particularly here, now that I know which way this is going to stitch out. And you can also add tape to the outside. I keep reusing the same tape. I use it until it just doesn't stick anymore. And I can put a little piece here. So the whole thing is taped. Once you've got your tape set, we're going to stitch the final outline. It's a really quick stitch. Sit and watch your machine. We're done with this. I'm going to peel off all the tape and get this out of the hoop, and we're going to go over to the cutting table. I have all my tape off. We want to cut 1/4 inch all the way around. So grab your ruler, find that thread. I'm going to line up the 1/4 inch line. The ruler does bounce a little bit. You've got a little bit of fabric bulk. Make sure to not be in a rush. Hold that down. Press it down really well. Once you've got the 1/4 inch cut, you want to go around and trim off the corners. We're going to be flipping this right side out. we need to reduce some of the bulk. As I'm looking at mine, it looks like I can also cut a little bit closer to my stitch line. Even though I measured, it was kind of bulky. It is hard to hold the ruler down. I can see the thread line really well. I'm going to cut this all a little bit closer. You can also trim the corner of the corners. I know that sounds weird, but if you really want to reduce this bulk, you can go around and do that as well. Up to you. Everything is trimmed. We're going to turn this right side out. You can bend the shape form, don't worry about it, and then we can also iron it. So flip it right side out, and you may need to get a point turner after you get it flipped to help poke out the corners. I'm going to use the purple fang gently into the corners. It's all flipped. What you want to do is go to your ironing board, pull it nice and tight. So look where those fold lines are. Get it folded down, pull it nice and tight, press it, and then pull up the top one too. Do the same thing. Get it right along that fold line and press it. I'm going to press it, get it looking nice and flat, and then I'm going to take one of my clappers, I may even take two of them, and stack them up, and then let it sit. That way it'll be nice and flat. We're going to work on the next house, and then we'll assemble both of them together at the end. We're moving on to house 4. This is also in a 5x7 hoop. Hoop your medium cutaway stabilizer. I went ahead and grabbed my fabric for the eaves, and I was able to separate the fusible. That way we can do a test. We can see if it makes that big of a difference. We're going to need some different color threads for this. This is their thread guide. This is the bottom of page 13. I'll call out the colors and I'll show you what I'm using as we go. You'll notice this does not have pictures for every step. We're going to be doing a lot of the same things. So if you like visual, this will be good for you. Let's work through this entire house together. We're going to start just like before. I'm going to do the front of the house. Let's head over to the machine. Let's pull up our file. We're on house 4. We're going to start with the front. I'm going to be using this color for both tawny and calico. I looked them both up online. They are extremely similar. We are starting with the one that they're calling tawny, so put that on your machine. Let's stitch out our house base placement line and sewing guide. Once that's stitched out, grab your shape form. Make sure to completely cover that line. I've got some tape on there already. We don't want that to move. Then we're going to stitch the tack down. My outline is stitched. We're going to do the same thing we did with the other house. First go around, take off your tape and trim everything outside the line. Then we need to pick the seam here and down here and run the seam ripper here. Ballpoint side down. Just get it through that shape form. Don't rip your stabilizer. Again, if you rip your stabilizer, flip it to the back, put down a couple of pieces of paper tape, you'll be fine. I'll go ahead and do that and then show you what that looks like. Everything's trimmed and I've got that split right down the middle there. Let's put this back on our machine. We're going to stitch the house front fabric placement line. You want to place your house front fabric down and stitch the tack down. If you're following the thread instructions, you're going to switch to the calico color. I'm going to stick with this color that I have on my machine. We're going to stitch the house slats details. Switch to white and we're going to stitch the outline for the fabric placement of the gable. Grab your gable fabric, right side up, cover the placement line, and then stitch the tack down. Once your tack down is stitched out, we're going to trim this just like we did before. Trim off the bottom first, and then you're going to trim these straight up at 90 degrees. So just like we did on the other house. Then you want to switch to the tawny color. I'm using the same color for tawny and calico, and we're going to stitch the gable satin outline. Going to switch to whatever color you're using for shadow. And we're going to stitch the windows outline. Let's work on these windows together because they have a curve. I'm going to start up here at the top of the curve and I'm going to do all the straight sides first. I'm going to try to continue using this seam ripper and just go slowly. follow the curve, just a little bit at a time. You can also do this with scissors. And I can tell it's probably not going to look the best, but again, haunted house, spooky neighborhood, it's okay. It does not have to be perfect. I'm going to go in with my scissors and do a little cleanup. That's what this one looks like. I'm going to go ahead and do this one. Once you've got the windows cut out, flip it to the back. You've got your chiffon. I already starched it, folded it in half, and pressed it. You want to tape all sides to make sure it stays in place. Still have the same color thread on. We're going to stitch the window outline and detail. Let's have a look at these windows. This fabric didn't seem to fray as much. It's like there's a jump thread there that needs to be trimmed, and then you want to flip to the back, take off the tape, trim your chiffon. It says within a 1/4 inch. Use fray check if you like. I'm also going to trim any stray threads so that when the house is put together they don't end up like this and then you see them through the window. Next we're going to stitch the balcony detail. It has that in the same color as your windows. Going to switch to the color they're calling Wild Plum. This is the thread that I will be using for that. It's a really good match for the fabric that's in the kit. Once the placement line has stitched out, grab your door fabric. Make sure to completely cover the placement line. You're going to tack it down and then trim everything that's outside of that tack down line. I've got that trimmed. We're going to stitch the satin outline around the door. Change to white thread. We're going to stitch the door window fill. Going to switch to the color they call shadow. Whatever color you used for your windows and the detail up here on the balcony, and we're going to stitch the door window detail. Switch to black to stitch the doorknob. We're going to stitch out the stairs. They're using a color called Coin. This is the color that I've pulled from my thread wall. Once the stair fill has stitched, you're going to switch to the color they're calling Dolphin, and it's a darker gray. I pulled a Floriani thread for that. Switch back to the tawny color and we're going to stitch the fold line. That's it for the house front. Let's go ahead and stitch the house back and then we'll trim both pieces together. Since there's no pictures on trimming this one, we'll do them both together at the same time. I'm going to take this out of the hoop, some fresh stabilizer, medium cutaway, and we're going to stitch out the back of this house. Let's work on the house back. I'm going to go ahead and load that file. I've got the tawny color on my machine. We're going to start with our placement line for our shape form. You want to place your shape form, cover that line, and then stitch the tack down. Just like before, we're going to trim everything outside of the line, and then you're going to pop the stitches up here and down here, and then slit the shape form using your seam ripper, ball side down. I've got everything trimmed, and I've got that little slit cut through the shape form. I'm going to put this back on the machine. We're going to stitch our fabric placement line. Grab your house back fabric, cover the placement line, and we'll stitch the tack down. If you're following the thread colors in the instructions, you want to switch to calico. I'm going to leave the same thread on my machine. We're going to stitch the house slats details. Same steps as before for the next part. Switch to white. We're going to stitch out the gable placement line. Then you'll take your gable fabric, cover the placement line, tack it down, trim the bottom, and then trim up the sides. I'm going to go ahead and run all those steps together. Forgot to turn the camera back on. I've stitched the placement. I stitched the tack down. I'm going to go ahead and trim here and then trim up straight and trim up straight. Switch to the tawny color. We're going to stitch the gable satin outline. Switch to the color shadow. We're going to stitch the window trimming line. The trimming line has stitched. We need to cut out the center. I already did both of the front windows, so I will go ahead and do that off camera. Here's the front, it's all trimmed, and here's the back with my chiffon. It's all taped down. I'm going to leave the same thread on the machine. It's the color shadow, and we're going to stitch out the window outline and the detail. Next, we're going to stitch the balcony detail, same color thread as your window. Going to switch to tawny and stitch the fold line. This is all done. The only thing left we need to do for this project is to stitch out the roof. They do the roof in medium gray. I'm going to go ahead and use this color that I have pulled. I'll go ahead and show the stitch out for the roof, but I'll do it to music. It's exactly like the roof we just did for the other house. Let's load the file for the roof. It's the same process, but it's not the same file. You don't want to make the same roof twice. This one's fatter. Let's load that file and let's stitch out our roof. Make sure you've got the right color on your machine. I've got the color I'm going to use for medium gray. I'm going to stitch this all to music since it's the same process we just did for the other house. All done with the roof. Let's get this over to the table and we'll get all of our pieces trimmed and then we'll start assembling our little houses. Hi everybody, we're going to trim and glue this house the same way we did the other one. The video is really long and we need to assemble our houses, so I'm speeding up this part. If you want to see this slower and in more detail, please watch the beginning where I step through this slowly for the first house. We're going to finish our trimming and gluing, turn your roof right side out, and then we'll put our houses together. Let's compare. This is the roof that had the fusible on everything. This roof did not have fusible on these two pieces. No difference to me. None of my corners are perfectly square. They're all a little bit rounded. I don't think it makes a difference. I can feel the difference when we go to attach this. This one might be a little bit easier to attach than this because it's a little stiffer. But other than that, they really seem the same to me. While I have these in front of me, I'm actually going to fold them and give them a quick press with the iron. I want to start to make that roof shape, so when we go to add these to the top of the house, they're kind of already in the shape they need to be. It'll make it easier to glue. So I'm going to give these a quick press. Let's start assembling our houses. This is the first house we put together today, which is house number 3. Remember, houses number 1 and 2 were last year. This is the front, and this is the back. We're going to put them together. I know this looks weird, but right sides together. They should be the same size. They are. I'm going to grab some clips and then I'll show you where you need to sew. I'm going to put my clips along the bottom because we're not going to sew the bottom. So that's a great place to put your clips and hold everything in place. This is the back of the house front, if that makes sense. 1, 2, 3 windows and a door. The sewing line is right here on the outside of that cobweb. You want to sew a straight seam. I would go back and forth, sew your seam, back and forth. And on this side of the house, this line here is the sewing line. So back and forth, straight seam, back and forth. You can see that mine are not cut exactly and they're not lining up exactly. I want to make sure that I'm straight along the bottom. What you can do is check your fence line, make sure those stitches, match as good as possible, but it's not going to be exact. I would say it's more important to make sure your bottom is straight because when these are together, you're going to be standing it up. So if you have the 2 bottom pieces and they're a little bit crooked, your house is going to be wonky. Stitch along that line, not this line here. It's right there, right along the edge of the cobweb, and then along this line I'll go do that and come back. All right, everything is sewn. I'm going to take off the clips. We'll flip it right side out. We'll see how I did. Looks like I might need to add a little more glue there. I'm going to sort of give a peek here. I'm a little crooked down here. That's okay though. You're going to flip it inside out. So don't freak out. You're going to bend it and squish it, and it's going to look really weird. But you have to turn it right side out. You can always iron it. So it's right side out. It looks really messy. What I'm going to do is go press it like this. Press it, make sure it looks nice. Press it, and then shift it to the next seam and make sure to press along the seam. I'm not sure I did a good job sewing this right here. It looks a little crooked, but I think ironing it is going to help. So I'm going to start by ironing it. Here's what it looks like after pressing. Much better. It's not perfect. You can see my little fence doesn't quite line up, but I'm okay with that. It's going to stand up crooked. I'm also okay with that. I could have done better in this corner here. Do you see that? What I can do is add a little more glue to it, and I can do that later. I want to finish this for the video. So the next thing we're going to do is attach our roof. This house uses the roof with the little stars on it, and it's going to go like that. This to me is the hardest part. I'm going to check it first and make sure it's going to fit. It looks okay. Looks like I may need to sort of bend this down a little bit. I'm going to put that under my iron. I'm going to flatten that out just a bit. It's too peaked and the roof isn't sitting right. Okay, I squished it a little bit. Technical term, I squished it. I'm looking at how this is going to fit. I don't think I necessarily did the best job right here. I've got some frayed fabric. Most of this will get covered. If you've got anything weird going on your roof line, don't worry about it. I keep thinking there's dirt on it, but it's the fabric. It has these weird little spots. That'll be fine. I'm going to try to use this quick dry glue. If it doesn't work, I'm going to bring out the glue gun. If you go through the instructions, it talks about aligning and eaves 1, eaves 2, parallel this, parallel that. You're going to stick it on your house. Underneath, you've got a fabric fold. What I like to do, this fabric fold goes toward the back, like that. But even if you don't do that, it's still going to work. I just think for some reason it sits better if you've got that piece like this going toward the back. Let's try this glue. It talks about adding dots of glue and checking the resource guide. I don't think I can dot this glue. It's really stringy. It seems to glue really well if I let it sit and get tacky, which was what I read when I was reading about how to use the glue. I'm going to do a thin bead of glue all the way around. That can sit for a bit. It's going to get tacky, which is what you want. Front of the house, fold going toward the back, squish your roof. Put your roof on. Try and make sure it looks good where you have it and that it's mostly centered. I've got it hanging a little more off the back. Gently press on the roof and then you have to hold it for a little bit. I sped up the video because it's boring to watch me hold the roof. I've been holding this for a few minutes. It looks pretty well set. I didn't perfectly center it. You can see how much I have on this side, that's the back, versus the front. I could have done better centering it when it's on the shelf. You're going to see it from the front. It looks cute. Nobody's going to notice. Nobody's going to care. If they do, they don't get candy. Here's what I'm doing so I can move on and film the next house. I've got it jammed between some of the clappers just to hold it into place as it continues to dry. It's setting really well. We've got our next house and we don't have pictures for this one, so we need to figure out where the sewing line is. The first thing I'm going to do is clip it along the bottom like I did with the other one. This is the front of the house. See the window and the 2 doors? We only have one line here, right there. That's your stitch line. on the other side, there's a line here, and then a line next to it, and we know it's not this one out here. Just like on the cobweb, it had an inside line, and then a line that went along the cobweb. I'm going to sew on that line right there. If that happens to be wrong, it's really easy to move in to stitch on this line, but I'm going to stitch on this line. I kind of see that as the equivalent as the one that ran alongside the cobweb on the other house. I sewed along those lines. Let's go ahead and take the clips off and flip it right side out and see how it looks. Yep, those are the right lines. I'm going to do the same thing. Give this a press. Make sure everything is pressed really nice. And then flip it and press on the other seams. This one's making me think of a milk carton like we used to get in kindergarten. Look at it. It looks pretty good. I've got my roof here again. I'm going to make sure that this part that's going that way stays going that way toward the back. Looks a little crooked. My house seems to be going a little bit that way. I could have done a better job probably. Yeah, right there. That needed to be a little bit tighter. Looks like I sewed that a little bit crooked. You know what? I'm going to leave it because I want to finish the video and get it posted so all of you can make the houses. And to show that even though it is by far not perfect, it is going to look really cute. I'll need to be more careful with this one, with my roof. Make sure that I have it a little more centered, not so much leaning toward the back. Let's get our glue. It's definitely wonky over here. Let's go for it anyway. Going to let that sit for a minute. You want to do this in a well-ventilated area. Crack your window, have a ceiling fan going, do this in the garage. It stinks, just so you know. Front of house, going that way. It's so crooked, but it's perfect because it's a rickety little house. Not worried about it. I'm going to try turning it upside down, seeing if that helps. Not really. This one's a little harder to get the roof on because it's fatter. I'm going to tell you right now, if you've got small hands, you may have trouble with this. I have really big hands, so I can kind of get good coverage, getting everything where it needs to be and get it held. If you've got really pretty little petite hands, this might be hard for you. I'm going to hold this for a bit. While the glue's setting, let's open our lights. These are ready to go. A lot of times you have to slip these open and pull a pull tab, but they're ready. They are wound together, so you can unwind them. Since we're sharing these between the two houses, I kind of want to divide it in half. Just sort of stretch it. Find the midway point, and then you can just crunch it back up. Because you're going to put half the lights under one house and half the lights under another. If you want this stretched along something, you can actually do that too and leave some in between in the background. I'm going to set these up right next to each other. Let's get a look at the houses. They're very cute. Flaws and all, they came out great. So don't worry if your seams don't match, if your roof is crooked, if your house is wonky. Look at them. They're absolutely adorable. Let's make sure they stand up. I wouldn't hire this contractor to build a real house, but they work. Let's look at the back. They look great. Let me set these up with the lights underneath, and then we'll get a good look at them and see what they look like. Here they are. Won't these look great in a Halloween display? Let's go in and get a little closer. Here's our little, it's still kind of drying and I can see it needs a little bit more glue roof. Very good. And the part about the fray check for the windows, remember mine are a little fuzzy? It takes nothing away from it. Look at that. Very cute. Let's go this way. Oh, I forgot to put the little tombstone up. Let's get that set up. You can use that in between the houses to hide the cord from the light. Isn't that cute? These will make a great Halloween display. Thank you so much for joining me today to make the Hoop Studio September 2025 Boo-tiful Neighborhood 2 houses. Thank you to Kimberbell for sending me this kit. Let me know what else you'd like to see on the channel. If you've got comments, questions, feedback, definitely leave it for me in the comments box below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. I'll be bringing you more Hoop Studio, perfectly pieced, lots of fun Kimberbell projects. I will see you next time, and happy Halloween!